You are a commander standing on the edge of the vast Ukrainian steppe in 1362. To your south lies the most terrifying military machine in human history. It's the Golden Horde. To the north is the safety of the forest you just left behind.
Most kings
In this position would be drunk in their tents, drowning the terror of the coming battle in wine. But your leader, Grand Duke Algirdas, sits by the fire, stone-cold sober. He stares into the flames with a terrifying intensity, guarding his strategy so closely that he snaps at anyone who asks for the plan. He famously growled, "If my beard knew what I was thinking, I would rip it out right now." This obsession with secrecy is the only reason your army is still alive. You have marched hundreds of miles into the belly of the Mongol Empire undetected, poised to strike the blow that will shatter history at the Battle of Blue Waters. We're watching a high-stakes gamble unfold in real time for the last century. The Golden Horde has been the apex predator of the known world. They are the western wing of the Mongol Empire, the descendants of Genghis Khan, who turned the sophisticated cities of Russia into graveyards and forced princes to grovel for the right to rule. In 1362, they are the superpower that no European army dares to meet in the open field. But Algirdas is not a typical European king. He is the Grand Duke of Lithuania, the ruler of the last pagan empire on the continent. While the rest of Europe is dying from the Black Death or burning heretics, Algirdas is building a war machine designed for one purpose: expansion. He does not play by the rules of chivalry, plays to win. He sees what others miss. The Golden Horde is bleeding. A civil war known as the Great Troubles is tearing the Mongol leadership apart. Over 20 Khans have murdered each other for the throne in just 2 decades. The central authority of the steppe has collapsed into a violent free-for-all. Warlords like Kutlubuga, Kgb, and Dmitry have carved out their own fiefdoms in the western steppes. Growing fat on tribute but weak on unity, they believe the forest barbarians of Lithuania would never dare cross the tree line into the open grasslands. Algirdas bets his entire kingdom on proving them wrong. He mobilizes his forces with a speed that defies medieval logistics. This is not a slow, lumbering crusade. This is a lightning raid scaled up to the size of an invasion. His army is a hybrid force of heavy cavalry and light mobile infantry. They move fast, striking targets before the smoke from the previous village has even cleared. The objective is Kiev, the ancient capital of the Rus. People has languished under the Tatar yoke for over 100 years. Its capture would not just be a territorial gain, it would be a geopolitical earthquake. Would signal to the world that the Mongols are no longer invincible. He pushes his men relentlessly south, leaving the familiar swamps and thickets of Lithuania, crossing into the wild fields. This is hostile territory. The tall grass hides Tatar scouts. The open sky offers no cover. Every mile they march brings them closer to the inevitable collision. The genius of Algirdas lies in his assessment of risk. He knows the Tatars rely on fear and mobility. He counters this with discipline and intelligence. While the Mongol warlords bicker amongst themselves, Algirdas is already inside their defense perimeter. He cuts off their communication lines. He seizes key outposts. He forces the 3 rival Khans to stop their infighting and scramble to face a common threat. By the time the Mongol leaders realize the scale of the invasion, Algirdas is already at the Sinayuka River, the Blue Waters. He has chosen the battlefield. He has dictated the terms of engagement. He has forced the masters of mobile warfare into a defensive posture. The old map of Eastern Europe, drawn by Mongol hooves and Russian blood, is about to be torn up. To appreciate the scale of the monster Algirdas is hunting, you have to look at the map of 1362 through the eyes of a terrified European. You're over a century. The Golden Horde has not just been a kingdom, it has been a force of nature. It is a colossus stretching from the Danube River to the deep freeze of Siberia. Its shadow covers the Russian principalities, enforcing the Tatar yoke. A system of dominance so complete that Russian princes are forced to travel to the Khan's court and beg for permission to rule their own people. But zoom in closer to the encampments near the mouth of the Dnieper River, and you see the cracks in the armor. The Golden Horde is dying of a self-inflicted disease. Since 1357, the throne of the Horde has changed hands more times than the seasons. Khans are dying of poison, daggers, and silk strangulation cords. In just 2 decades, nearly 2 dozen, claimants have seized power only to be murdered by the next ambitious relative. This political hemorrhage has disastrous consequences. With the capital and Sarai consumed by civil war, the Western territories have effectively gone rogue. They are ruled not by a single unified great Khan, but by warlords acting as kings. Enter the 3 men who stand in Algerdos's path: Kutlabuga, Kajibi, and Dimitri. These 3 Tatar lords control the vast steppes north of the Black Sea. But in 1362, they are rivals first and allies second. They squabble over tax collection rights. They fight over grazing lands. They maintain their armies to protect themselves from each other as much as from external threats. This division breeds a fatal arrogance. To them, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania is a nuisance, not an existential threat. They view the Lithuanians as forest bandits, dangerous in the swamps perhaps, but suicidal if they step onto the open grass. The Mongols have defeated the Teutonic Knights. They have crushed the Hungarians. They possess the composite bow, weapon that can kill at 300 yards. So when scouts report dust clouds moving south from Kiev, the Khans do not panic. They see an opportunity for plunder. They believe Algirdas is walking into a trap. Expect to employ the feigned retreat, the classic maneuver where they ride away, draw the heavy knights out of formation, and then turn to shower them with arrows. But the Khans are fighting the last war, relying on the reputation of their ancestors. They fail to notice that Algirdas isn't bringing a traditional feudal army. He is bringing a counter-strategy specifically designed to neutralize their advantages. While they casually assemble their forces near the Blue Waters, treating the upcoming battle as a routine punitive expedition, they miss the critical signal. Algirdas has moved too fast. He has bypassed the outer settlements that usually provide early warning. He has denied them the time to gather the full might of the steppe. The 3 warlords gather their forces at the river confluence, a massive sea of horses, yurts, and banners. It looks impressive. It looks invincible. But it is a fragile coalition held together by pride. They are about to face a unified singular will that has been sharpening its claws in the dark to understand. The army marching south to meet the Golden Horde, you have to discard the traditional image of a medieval crusade. The men following Algirdas are not fighting for the cross. They are the last holdouts of the old gods in Europe. The Grand Duchy of Lithuania is an island of paganism in a sea of aggressive monotheism. By all logic, Lithuania should have been crushed. But they survived because they mastered a weapon more potent than the sword: adaptability. Algirdas leads a force that is a terrifying hybrid of East and West. At its core are the Lithuanian elite warriors who worship Perkanas, the thunder god. They ride heavy war horses, like Western knights, clad in mail and plate, but they fight with the ferocity and ambush tactics of forest tribes. However, the real genius of the Grand Duchy lies not in how they fight, but in how they rule. As Algirdas pushes into the Slavic lands of what is now Ukraine, he doesn't come as a conqueror, forcing a new culture upon the locals. He comes with a brilliant, simple promise: status quo. The Lithuanians operate under a famous maxim: we introduce no new customs and change, no old ones. Think about how revolutionary that is for the 14th century. The Teutonic Knights want to convert you. The Mongols want to tax you into starvation and enslave your children. But Algirdas tells the Orthodox princes of Ruthenia, keep your religion, keep your laws, keep your language. Just pay your taxes to Vilnius instead of Sarai, and we will protect you with our swords. It is a masterstroke of political engineering. It transforms the invasion into a liberation. As the Lithuanian army moves through the Ruthenian lands, they are not bogged down by partisan warfare. Instead, they gather strength. Local Slavic regiments, eager to throw off the Tatar yoke, join Algirdas's ranks. The army swells, becoming a coalition of the willing. You have pagan Lithuanians riding shoulder to shoulder with Orthodox Rus soldiers. United not by a god but by a common enemy, the Rus contingents bring intimate knowledge of the steppe. They have fought the Tatars for generations. They know the rhythm of the horse archers, the feints, and the signals. Algirdas integrates this intelligence into his command structure. He absorbs the military doctrines of his vassals and fuses them with the discipline of his northern guard. The force that finally approaches the edge of the wild fields is perfectly engineered to kill Mongols. It possesses the heavy shock power of European cavalry, combined with the strategic patience of the Rus defenders. Algirdas knows he cannot outrun the Mongols. Their horses are faster. He cannot outshoot them. Their bows have a longer range, so he plans to do something else entirely. He plans to outdiscipline them. He intends to present a target that refuses to break, a wall of shields and spears that absorbs the arrows and waits for the precise moment when the chaotic, divided enemy makes a mistake. To comprehend the magnitude of this campaign, you must look at the prize waiting at the end of the spear. Algirdas is not marching south merely to kill Tatars. He is marching to seize the ghost of an empire, Kiev. In 1362, Kiev is a shadow of its former self. 2 centuries prior, it was a metropolis that rivaled Paris and London. But the Mongol invasion of 1240 changed everything. The Golden Horde didn't just conquer the city, they dismantled it. For over 100 years, its once great center has functioned as little more than a tributary outpost for the Khan. The reality of the Tatar yoke here is brutal and bureaucratic. It is a constant state of extortion. The Mongols installed officials known as baskaks, tax collectors, backed by armed guards. They count every head of cattle, every bushel of grain, and every able-bodied son. 10% of everything goes to the horde. If you can't pay in silver, you pay in skin. The taking of slaves to be sold in the markets of Crimea is the terrifying cost of doing business with the Khan. Algirdas sees this suffering, but he also sees the map. He understands that whoever controls Kiev controls the Dnieper River, and whoever controls the Dnieper holds the keys to the trade routes connecting the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. If Lithuania can secure this corridor, they will create a superhighway of commerce that flows directly into their pockets. Algirdas intends to cut the financial artery of the Golden Horde. As the Lithuanian army secures the towns north of the wild fields, they do something simple but revolutionary. They kick out the baskaks. They stop the flow of silver to the steppe. Imagine the shockwave this sends through the Mongol command structure. For decades, the warlords have treated these lands as their personal bank accounts. They rely on this tribute to pay their soldiers and maintain their power base during the civil war. Suddenly, the money stops. The grain stops. The slaves stop. Algirdas has effectively placed a siege on their wallets. He forces their hand. The 3 Khans can no longer ignore the forest barbarians. They are being starved of the resources they need to survive the great troubles. The Khans are forced to ride north to intercept the threat before it solidifies its grip on the breadbasket of the region. For the people of Ruthenia, the approaching Lithuanian army represents a desperate hope. They're not looking for a new master. They're looking for a shield. The summer of 1362 burns hot on the Ukrainian steppe. The location is the confluence of the Sinyoka and Southern Bug rivers, a place history remembers simply as the Blue Waters. First comes the sound. Before you even see the Golden Horde, you hear them. It is a low, thrumming vibration in the earth, the pounding of tens of thousands of hooves. Then the dust cloud rises on the southern horizon. When the army of the 3 Khans finally crests the ridge, it looks less like a military formation and more like a moving city. Kutlubuga, Kabi, and Dmitri have emptied the western steppes. To answer Algirdas's challenge, their force is massive, likely outnumbering the Lithuanians significantly. They bring with them the cacophony of the nomadic war camp, the beating of kettle drums, the shrill whistles of commanders, and the chaotic shouting of men from a dozen different tribes. It is a spectacle designed to terrify, but when the Khans look across the river valley, they do not see an army trembling in fear. They see lines. Grand Duke Algirdas has arranged his forces in a formation that defies the logic of steppe warfare. His army stands in absolute silence. The sunlight glints off the heavy plate armor of the Lithuanian elite and the polished shields of the Rus infantry. There are no taunts. There is no movement. It's just a wall of steel waiting in the heat. For the Mongol commanders, this static discipline is confusing, perhaps even insulting. In their experience, European armies are clumsy beasts that charge blindly or cower behind walls, but Algirdas is doing neither. He's inviting them in. This visual standoff reveals the soul of the two armies. On the southern bank, you have the Golden Horde in its twilight years, loud, numerically superior, but internally fractured. On the northern bank, you have the Grand Duchy, outnumbered, but forged into a singular instrument of will. To survive a battle against the Golden Horde, you must first understand the geometry of death. The Mongol way of war is built on a single, terrifying shape, the circle. They spread their wings, utilizing their superior speed to wrap around the enemy's flanks, surrounding them in a shrinking ring of arrows until the trapped army collapses from panic and exhaustion. Algirdas knows this. He understands that if he meets the Khans on the open, flat grass, his army will be encircled and annihilated. He needs walls. But on the vast Ukrainian steppe, there are no stone castles. So he uses the water. Algirdas has positioned his forces. With surgical precision, he anchors his flanks against the riverbanks and dense natural obstacles. By using the terrain to cover his sides, he forces the Mongols into a funnel. He denies them the space they need to perform their deadly caracal. If they want to fight him, they have to come straight at him. But Algirdas goes further. He breaks his army into 6 distinct, self-contained regiments. He arranges them in a concave formation, a half-moon shape facing the enemy. This is a masterstroke of medieval warfare. Why a half-moon? Because it creates a kill zone in the center. If the Mongols charge the middle, the Lithuanian wings can close in. Turning the enemy's favorite tactic of encirclement against them, the front ranks are filled with the heavy infantry and dismounted knights of the Ruslands. These men are the anvil. They carry tall pavis shields and heavy mail designed to absorb the kinetic energy of Mongol arrows. Behind them, hidden from the immediate view of the enemy, sit the elite Lithuanian heavy cavalry, the hammer. Algirdas has effectively transformed the open steppe into a corridor fight. He has stripped the Golden Horde of their greatest assets, speed and maneuverability, forces the 3 Khans to play a game of brute force, a game where Lithuanian steel is heavier than Tatar arrows. The battle begins not with a roar, but with a whistle. It is a sound that has haunted the nightmares of Europe for 3 generations, the collective shriek of thousands of composite bows releasing at once. The sky above the blue waters darkens as the first volley arcs over the steppe. A soldier in the Lithuanian front line, this is the moment of truth. You crouch behind your shield, listening to the terrifying rhythm of the impact. The arrows of the Golden Horde strike with the force of a hammer, but today they are meeting resistance. The heavy pavis shields of the Rus infantry and the plate armor of the Lithuanian elite are holding. Kutlubuga and the other Khans watch from their command hill, expecting the usual result. They expect the enemy line to waver. They expect gaps to open up, but the line holds. The last pagans do not panic. When a man falls, another steps forward to fill the void. Silent and grim, seeing that the long-range bombardment isn't shattering. The formation, the Khans order the next phase. Waves of horse archers ride furiously toward the Lithuanian lines, loosing arrows at point-blank range, screaming war cries. And then, just as they seem about to crash into the spears, they wheel away. This is the trap. This is how they destroyed the knights of Hungary and Poland. They want to provoke a reaction. They want the Europeans to break formation to chase them. But Algirdas has drilled his men for this exact moment. He rides behind the lines, his voice cutting through the din. Stand firm. Imagine the discipline required. You're being shot at. Your instinct screams at you to charge the men killing your friends. But you must stand still, must take the punishment and do nothing. Now shift your perspective. Look at this through the eyes of a Mongol horseman. For his entire life, warfare has followed a script. You shoot, the enemy breaks. You chase, you win. But today the script is broken. You ride up to these forest barbarians. You scream, you shoot, and they just stand there. They don't chase you. They don't scatter. Confusion begins to ripple through the Mongol ranks. The horses are getting tired. The quivers are getting lighter, and the Khans are becoming frustrated. Their entire way of war is predicated on the enemy making a mistake. But Aljodas refuses to make one. The battle drags on for hours. It becomes a grueling stalemate. The Mongols are expending massive amounts of energy for little gain. Their arrows are running low, and the psychological weight of the battle begins to shift. The hunter becomes unsure. The prey looks less like prey and more like a predator waiting to pounce. Aljodas watches the sun. He sees the subtle changes in the enemy's movement. The Mongol charges are becoming ragged. Their horses are foaming. The three Khans are losing control of the tempo. Aljodas has proven that the Golden Horde is a one-trick pony. If you deny them the open field, and if you deny them the panic they feed on, they don't have a plan B, and now that the enemy has exhausted their momentum, Aljodas prepares to unleash the kinetic energy he has been hoarding all day. The sun is dipping toward the western horizon. The battlefield at Blue Waters is littered with broken arrows and exhausted horses. The Golden Horde has thrown everything they have at the Lithuanian line, and nothing has worked. The Mongol warriors are tired, frustrated, and crucially, their quivers are almost empty. Aljodas sits high in his saddle, watching the rhythm of the enemy slow down. He sees the Khans hesitating, arguing among themselves on the distant hill. The moment has arrived. Grand Duke raises his mace. Horns blast across the Lithuanian line. The shield wall, which has stood like granite for hours, suddenly shifts. The Rus infantry step aside, opening gaps in the formation like gates opening in a dam. Through those gates pours the thunder. The elite Lithuanian heavy cavalry has been waiting impatiently behind the infantry all day. Now they are unleashed. These are not nimble step ponies. These are massive European destriers, bred for weight and impact, clad in mail barding. The knights riding them are encased in heavy plate. The Mongol horsemen, who just moments ago were casually riding close to the lines, suddenly find themselves facing a wall of charging steel. They try to turn, to use their speed to escape, but they are too close. They're trapped by the geography of the riverbanks and their own packed numbers. The collision is catastrophic. It is not a graceful duel of swords. It is a brutal equation of physics. Mass times velocity. The heavy Lithuanian war horses smash into the lighter Mongol mounts, bowling them over like toys. Lance tips crunch through leather armor and silk tunics. The sheer kinetic energy of the charge shatters the front ranks of the horde instantly. For the Mongol warrior, this is a nightmare scenario. Their entire way of fighting depends on space, on keeping the enemy at arm's length. Now the enemy is right on top of them. In close quarters, their bows are useless. Curved sabers bounce harmlessly off the thick Lithuanian plate armor. They're trapped in a crush of bodies, unable to maneuver, being hammered by maces and war axes. Panic. The weapon the Mongols have used so effectively against others for a century now turns against them. The discipline of the horde evaporates. The three Khans watch in horror as their invincible forces dissolve into a terrified mob. The internal divisions of the Great Troubles resurface immediately. There is no coordinated defense, only a desperate scramble for survival. The Khans themselves realize the day is lost. They abandon their armies, turning their horses south toward the safety of Crimea, leaving their men to be cut down. The hunters have become the hunted. The Lithuanian pursuit is ruthless, pushing the disorganized remnants of the horde into the rivers and the marshes. As evening falls over the Battle of Blue Waters, the silence returns to the steppe. But it is different now. It is the silence of total victory. The myth of Mongol invincibility. A myth that held Eastern Europe hostage for 120 years, lies broken in the mud, trampled under the hooves of Aljodas' heavy cavalry. The aftermath of the Battle of Blue Waters is not just a military victory, it is a geopolitical landslide. The three Khans vanish into the steppes, their power broken, their reputations destroyed. They leave behind not just their dead, but the keys To an entire civilization, Algirdas wastes no time. He understands momentum. He marches his victorious army straight to Kiev for over 100 years. Since the catastrophic Mongol siege of 1240, Kiev has lived in fear. But today, the army approaching does not carry the horsetail banners of the Khan. They carry the Vitus. The White Knight of Lithuania, there is no siege. The gates of Kiev swing open. The local princes and the Orthodox clergy welcome Algirdas, not as a conqueror, but as a deliverer. This validates his grand strategy of tolerance. By respecting the local religion and customs, he effectively walks into the most important city. In Eastern Europe, without shedding a drop of blood, the Tatar yoke over the heart of Ukraine is snapped. The consequences of this moment ripple outward with terrifying speed. With Kiev secured, the dominoes fall. Podolia, Chernihiv, and the vast tracts of the Dnieper Basin pledge allegiance to Vilnius. Almost overnight, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania transforms, ceases to be merely a Baltic forest state, and becomes the largest nation in Europe. Look at the map after. 1362. The Grand Duchy stretches from the freezing waters of the Baltic Sea. In the north, almost to the warm currents of the Black Sea in the south, it creates a massive buffer zone, a shield that protects Central Europe from the chaos of the East. For the Golden Horde, the loss is catastrophic. The great troubles deepen. Deprived of the taxes and grain from the rich Slavic lands, the Khans turn on each other with even greater ferocity, fighting over the scraps of a shrinking empire. The Blue Waters' defeat exposes their weakness to the world. It signals to other vassal states, most notably the rising Principality of Moscow, that the Mongol masters bleed just like anyone else. Algirdas has achieved the impossible. He has beaten the superpower of the age on its own terrain. He has united pagan and Christian under one banner, and he has done so with a cold, calculating brilliance that reshaped the map forever. If you open a standard history textbook, you will often read that the Tatar yoke was broken by the Russian prince Dmitry Donskoy at the Battle of Kulikovo in 1380. That battle is legendary, but there is an uncomfortable truth hiding in the margins. Kulikovo happened 18 years after the Battle of Blue Waters. And while Kulikovo was a symbolic victory, the Mongols returned 2 years later and burned Moscow to the ground. In contrast, the victory at Blue Waters in 1362 was decisive. The Golden Horde never truly recovered their dominance over the Ukrainian lands. So why is this battle a footnote? Why is the genius of Algirdas largely forgotten by the wider world? The answer lies in who held the pen. For centuries, the narrative of Eastern European history was dominated by the rise of Moscow and later the Russian Empire. The story of a powerful pagan, multi-ethnic Lithuanian state that liberated Kiev didn't fit the narrative. Soviet historiography downplayed the distinct history of the Grand Duchy. The Battle of Blue Waters became a ghost, inconvenience to the official version of history. But today we look at the map with fresh eyes. We see that the collapse of the Golden Horde was not a single dramatic explosion, but a process accelerated by the disciplined silence of the North. Algirdas taught the world a lesson that remains relevant today. Empires are rarely destroyed solely from the outside. They rot from within, consumed by corruption and division. The external force merely kicks down the door that is already unhinged. Furthermore, the Grand Duchy's success proves the power of integration over imposition. By saying we introduce no new customs, Algirdas built an empire that lasted for centuries, eventually evolving into the polished Lithuanian Commonwealth, a superpower that would dominate the region until the late 1700s. So the next time you think of the Mongol Empire, don't just picture the unstoppable waves of Genghis Khan. Picture the moment the tide turned. Picture the tall grass of the Blue Waters. Picture the sober, calculating Grand Duke who refused to drink wine so he could drink in every detail of the battlefield. And remember that history is not just about the loudest battles. It's about the ones that actually changed the map.